Today's daf, Be'ezras Hashem, is Masechta Menachos Daf Chaf Beis, number 22. And we will begin on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, basically 4 lines from the top, 3 lines from the top. I'll just basically discuss a moment. We got off a little bit early yesterday, but the point that the Gemara made was that salt, you don't pay for salt. You don't pay when a person goes and brings a carbon on a mizbeach, and you see the guy is salting his mincha, or on the regular mizbeach when you're bringing up meat to be thrown on the fire of the mizbeach, there was salt there. Who paid for that salt? So that's a communal obligation that you pay for the salt, and therefore the Gemaras felt that the Kahanim should have a right to take that salt. I mean, what's the difference if a Kohen brings his own carbon? What should be the difference if the Kohen brought his own carbon? He should be able to partake the salt because he chips in to the Trumas Halishka. So he's a part of the he pays his membership dues. So the Gemara says that according to Ben Bukhri, a Kohen doesn't really pay his membership dues. He doesn't have to participate in the Machzas HaShekel. So according to Ben Bukhri, we would have thought that a Kohen should not, when he brings a carbon mincha, should not be able to take the salt from the communal salt. He has to bring salt from home. So the chiddush is that a kohen could also take the salt over there, and the Bezdin said it's okay. But certainly, when a person brings a carbon, the wood of the carbon, the burning of the wood comes from the communal. That's paid for by the Beis Hamikdash, and it's part of your membership dues. So now the Gemara is going to discuss, where do we know that from? So here we go. Chav Beis Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. The Eitzim, let me just make it bigger. The Eitzim de Pshita. You were so certain, the Tana, the Pshita le Latana, the Eitzim wood, the Pshita le Latana, that the Tana was so certain, the Mishal Tzibor, that the Tzibor pays for it. In other words, when a person brings a carbon, we don't ask him to bring the wood. But it's covered by the Beis Hamikdash. Lahavdil, when you rent an apartment, the shtick of landlords is to create a situation where the tenant pays the heat. But by the Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash covered your wood. How do you know that? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Yochal, I would have thought, somebody says, Harei alai oila. I promise to bring an oila. I would have thought Yavi Eitzim B'Teich Beisach. He should bring wood from his house. Keder Shemevi Nesachim B'Teich Beisach. Just like he brings the Nesachim, the flour and the wine that go along with your carbon, he has to pay for that. So I would think that along with doing that, you should pay for the wood, the burning of your carbon. Talmud Bavli, the pasuk says, Al Ho'eitzim Asher Al Ho'eish Asher Al Mizbeach. This is just juxtaposition between the wood, the fire, and the Mizbeach. So what's the hekesh? So we darshan ma mizbeach mishel tzibor. The mizbeach definitely was bought from the communal funds. In fact, David HaMelech made a collection to build a mizbeach. So there was the tzibor pays for the mizbeach. So also av eitzim ve'esh mishel tzibor, the wood and I guess the fuel for the fire or to start the fire. The kind of material that you needed to start the fire had to be Mishel Tzibor from the communal. Divrei Rab Lazar ben Shimon. So says Rab Lazar ben Shimon. Rab Lazar ben Shamua, Rab Lazar ben Shamua says he agrees. Okay, he agrees that the mizbeach and the wood are from the tzibor. He agrees with that idea that the tzibor pays for the wood. But he says the hekesh teaches me something even more stricter regarding the wood. Ma mizbeach shaloi nishtamish b'hedyet, af eitzim ve'esh shaloi nishtamish b'hedyet. The mizbeach had to be from brand new material that was never pre-used in any form, in any shape or form. So also the wood that you're going to use for the mizbeach, you can't say, oh, I'm going to take apart. Bezdin is they're going to buy a old bench from a shul that's selling out benches and then turn that into the wood. Like, they can't have old wood, right? It has to be brand new wood. Here, you see the picture of Eitzim Yishanim. They can't have you can't have old wood. Old wood is no good. It has to be brand new wood, never used before. And I don't know, fire. I mean, I guess the fire that you're going to use to light the mizbeach should not have been used for personal use. Somebody used it for cooking. So my benayu, what's the difference between Reb Lezer Bar Shua and Reb Lezer Bar Shimon? Do you have to use brand new wood? According to Reb Lezer Bar Shimon, he didn't hold what Reb Lezer Ben Shemua held, and he says you don't have to use brand new wood. You could go to the junkyard and get wood there. But Reb Lezer Ben Shemua was very strict that you should use brand new wood. Says the Gemara, V'atiki lo, you can't use old wood. But the pasuk says in Tanakh, Vayoyma Arvana el David. David purchased the place of where he's going to build the Beis Hamikdash from this person called Arvana. And this Arvana was a generous person. So he said, you pay me for whatever, and with one price, you get all the furniture. Yikach v'yal adoni hamelech hatoy b'neiv, you could come and take whatever you want. Rei habakuk, you could take the cattle that I have there on this spot. La'oila, bring it for a carbon oila. V'hamarigim, and the wood tools. Kli habakar, tools that were used for my cattle. Lo eitzim, wood tools that were used for my cattle, used for eitzim, for wood. You could use it for wood. So and the pasuk says that David bought the whole property with all the furniture, right? So, and he used the wood that was previously used for material for other tools. He used that for the wood of the mizbeach. You just told me it has to be brand new wood. Answers the Gemara, Hachanami bechadati, and that was talking about brand new wood. It was set aside to be used for cattle. It was set aside. We'll see what Merigan is, to be used for threshing, but it was never used yet, and therefore, David used it for wood for the mizbeach. But technically, it had to be new. Says the Gemara, my Merigan. What is this word Merigan? It's not a common word. Amaula mita shel turbo. It's a bed of turbo. My mita shel turbo. What's a bed of turbo? Amar Rav Yehuda said, "Ize the kurkasa the dashabe dishtoi." It's a plank of wood that's connected to an animal that they thresh grains. So if you want to see what a merigan looks like, you can look. Let me see the fact. Here's the picture. You have a plank of wood connected to cows, and it has teeth on the bottom of it, and somehow this is used to thresh the wheat. So that was an ancient way of it, and so to use that wood for the mizbeach was permitted, provided that this tool was never used before. Omar Rav Yosef says, "My crop." What is the pasuk that says moirigim is something that was used to thresh wheat with? The pasuk says, "Hine samtich lemoireg." God says, "I'm going to make you like a moireg, choretz chodesh, that has brand new teeth, bal pepiyos, that has brand new indentations and teeth, tadish harem, and you're going to be able to thresh the mountains." In other words, God's going to make it feel so powerful that we're going to, mow over our enemies. So we see that moirigin was something that was used as a mow over of items. So therefore, that explained what the word moirigin is. But bottom line is, what you just learned was that the wood, because of a hekesh, had to be paid for by the tzibor. You didn't have to bring your own wood, and furthermore, you had to buy, when they used the wood in the Beis Hamikdash, it had to be, according to one opinion, Reb Lezer ben Shamua, brand new wood. Okay, new Mishnah. This arev kumtza b'koimitz chaverta. Okay, you have a carbon mincha, right? You have a koimitz. Right over here is a koimitz. What happens if somebody threw in another koimitz over here, right? Somebody else's koimitz. You got mixed up. Two koimitz fell into the same pot. Or what happens if the koimitz got mixed up with a minchas kohanim, the minchas kohen Mashiach, the minchas nesachim, with the mincha that a kohen brought, the mincha that was brought every day by a kohen gadol, and the minchas nesachim, or mincha that was brought along with any carbon that you brought. And there, they didn't do a kamitza. Let's say the kamitz, you took kamitz of your mincha, and then it got mixed up into a bowl of somebody else's mincha, which was totally thrown on the mizbeach. Let's say this was the kohen's mincha. When the kohen brought this, they didn't do a kamitza. They took the whole thing and threw it on the mizbeach. Because kol minchas kohen kolil takter has to be thrown completely on the mizbeach. So what happens if your mincha got mixed, your kamitz got mixed up with somebody else's mincha? So the Mishnah says, kashera, it's kosher. And what you do all at once, you just makriv it on the mizbeach with both your kamitz and the other mincha in there. If it's both in the same bowl, you turn it over onto the fire, and that's it. Rabbi Yehuda says that if your kamitza got mixed up with your kamitza got mixed up with the minchas kohen Mashiach, with the bowl of the mincha belonging to a kohen gadol, or the bowl of a mincha belonging to any carbon, so then it's psula. It would be possible. Now, why can't I throw the whole mixture onto the mizbeach? So Rabbi Yehuda says an interesting thing, and we'll explain what this means in a second. Shazu in the Gemara, zu belula se'ava. You have to understand that your kamitza has only one lug of oil. So your kamitza came from a mincha that had one lug of oil, see, in one jug of oil. And therefore, it's more of a thicker batter. And their mincha, zu belula saraka. The other mincha, the kohen gadol's mincha, had 3 lugin of oil. So it's more liquidy. So, and therefore, the hein boilers zu mazu. And therefore, they absorb each other. In other words, they're not of the same consistency. So your kamitza will absorb some of the oil that's in the minchas kohen Mashiach, in the kohen gadol's mincha. And the minchas kohen is going to absorb some of the oil that's in your kamitza. And it's going to mevatel it. That's what it's going to just nullify it. So the kamitza is going to be missing oil, and the big mincha is going to be missing oil. Now, how's that possible? So we'll explain how that works in the Mishnah. But the way we'll explain how that works in the Gemara. But the way to see it is to just understand a basic machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in another area, and then you'll be able to apply it to over here. Tanan Hasa, we learned over there. You have blood of a carbon that got mixed up with water. So im yesh by maras dam, if you can still see that it looks red, bloody, kosher, then it's kosher to do zrika with that blood. This are beyayin, but if it got mixed up with wine, so it's always going to look red, right? So then we imagine the wine as if it's water. Had it been water, would you be able to see some blood in that mixture? Then it's still kosher for zrika. But if not, then it's batal, and you can't do zrika in it. With nisara bedam, let's say the blood of the carbon got mixed up with the blood of another animal, of chulin, or bedam chaya, or the dam of a wild animal, certainly not a carbon. So again, you have the carbon blood that got mixed up with other bloods that are non-carbon bloods. So we imagine as if the non-carbon bloods, as if it was water. If there was such an amount of non-carbon blood that if it was water, then it wouldn't have an appearance of red anymore. It wouldn't look like blood anymore. So then this mixture is now puzzle for throwing on the mizbeach. But if not, then it would be kosher. So we always view it as if the other side of the mixture is as if it's water. Rabbi Yehuda has this big chiddush, and he says, "Ein dam mevatel dam." Even if a drop of carbon blood falls into a ton of non-carbon blood, you could still sprinkle it on the mizbeach. Why? Because dam doesn't get nullified by blood. That's called min b'mina. If they're same type, they don't nullify each other. so it doesn't get bottled. So you can throw it on the mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ushneya mikra echad darshu." They both, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, got their source from the one pasuk. Pasuk says on Yom Kippur, "V'lakhu midam apar midam hasoyer," that the Kohen Gadol mixes the blood of the par and the blood of the goat, and then the Torah says, take from that mixture the blood of the cow and the blood of the goat, and throw it on the mizbeach. Well, the Torah still calls it the blood of the goat, even though it's mixed up with the blood of the cow. And everybody knows, everybody knows, there's more blood of a cow than the blood of a goat. And yet, the Torah tells you they don't nullify each other. So what do you learn from that? That blood and blood did not nullify each other. So Rabbanan Sabri, Rabbanan held, we go to Amid Beis, Mikan, from there we learned that once something it goes on to the Mizbeach, it doesn't nullify each other. So therefore, there on Yom Kippur, when they're both carbon bloods, they don't nullify each other. However, if one of the bloods was a non-carbon blood and one was a carbon blood, so since both are not supposed to be brought on the Mizbeach, only one is supposed to be brought on the Mizbeach, they would nullify each other. So what you see, the Rabbanan hold that only oilin makes it not bottle, but min b'minoi, if it was just blood with blood, but they didn't, both of them did not necessarily go onto the Mizbeach, they would be mevatel each other. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mikan, lemin b'minoi she'ein bottle. What you see from here is that the min b'minoi is not bottle. Okay? So the min b'minoi is not bottle. So min b'minoi is not bottle. And therefore, that's why the bloods don't nullify each other. But if there was just oila on the mizbeach, let's say you have an oil from one mincha mixed up to the flour of another mincha, even though they both end up on the mizbeach, they could be mevatel each other, because it's only min b'mina is ein batel, but just the fact that they end up on the mizbeach, it wouldn't stop them from nullifying each other. Therefore, let's bring it back to let's say by the mincha. If you're dealing there, we're dealing with the min b'she'enoi minoi. So if we're dealing with a min b'she'enoi minoi, we're going to explain how that works. So therefore, according to Rabbanan, if it's min b'she'enoi minoi, but they're both going on to the mizbeach, they will not be mevatel each other. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's min b'she'enoi minoi, then they nullify each other. So let's explain. Let's go back to the bloods. The blood, Rabbanan Sabri, Rabbanan held that you learn from the pasuk from Yom Kippur, Mekan, La'oilem, as soon as something goes on to the Mizbeach, if they get mixed up with each other, both are supposed to be brought on the Mizbeach, She'ein mevatlin zeh. And that's why the Dam HaPa'ir and the Dam HaSa'ir don't nullify each other, because they're both supposed to be brought on the Mizbeach. Answers Freg Gemara, maybe it's because they're of the same type. That's why they don't mevatel each other. So that's why they didn't mevatel each other. So the Gemara says, if the Torah would have given you an example of blood of, let's say, carbon blood mixed up with non-carbon blood, then I would grant you what you're trying to say. But the Torah gives you an example of two carbon bloods mixing with each other and saying that they're not nullified. So we learned that the stress is mishum de oilam. It's because they're oil on the mizbeach, that's why they don't nullify each other. But if they were just min b'minoi, they would nullify each other. So the Gemara says, Vidilma ika min b'minoi oilam. Maybe the Torah requires, in order not to nullify each other, you have to have two qualities. One, that they both the same type, and like two bloods, and also they go on the mizbeach, like the damapar and damasar. How do you know one without the other is also enough not to be mevatel? How do you know oilin is enough to say that they don't mevatel zazah? Kashi, you have a good question. And the Gemara is going to say the same thing according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, Mikan, you learn from the pasuk min b'minoi she'ein batel. The fact that the Torah says that Dama Poyer and Dama Sar, they're both bloods, and they're both the same type, so they don't nullify each other. Says the Gemara of Dilma Mishum de Oilenhu. Maybe it's because they both end up on the Mizbeach. That's why they don't nullify each other. So the Gemara says, if the Torah is trying to stress because they go on the Mizbeach, the Torah should give you another case. A mean b'she'enim the Torah should tell you a case of a mean and a not the same type who end up on the Mizbeach, and they don't nullify each other. They don't nullify each other. Could the Kamrat? Then I would agree to you that the point is it's oilin. But the only example the Torah gives, it was two bloods mixing with each other. I'll tell you the reason why they don't nullify each other is not because they end up on the Mizbeach. It was mishum the min b'minahu, because they're one of the same type. Says the Gemara, "V'dilma adika min b'minoi v'oilim." Maybe you need two qualities. Again, same question that you asked of the Rabbanim. How do you know for sure that the reason why the Torah says the Dama Par and the Dama Sara don't nullify each other is because they're the same bloods? Maybe it's because they both, and maybe the Torah requires that they both be the same type and both end up on the Mizbeach, and only then they don't nullify each other. How do you know if min by mina enough is enough not to nullify each other? Kasha, that's a question. Okay, so now if we understand the Chachamim hold that min b'minoi could nullify each other. So if you you're gonna min b'minoi could nullify each other, but if they end up on the Mizbeach, nothing gets nullified. So that makes everything simple. If I have my kamitza, right? I have my little kamitza that ends up into somebody. My kamitza ends up into the minchas kohen, right? Into here. My kamitza ends up in their hair, and they all get mixed up. So they both end up on the Mizbeach, so they don't nullify each other. That's why the Chachamim say that you could take that bowl with my kamitza and the minchas kohen and throw it on the Mizbeach. Everything is good. But Rabbi Yehuda says not so fast. And the Gemara is going to explain why Rabbi Yehuda said no. So now we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, b'minchas kohen Mashiach, b'minchas nesachin, if my kamitza gets mixed up with a minchas of a kohen gadol or minchas nesachin, psula, you can't throw it on the Mizbeach. They swallow each other's oil, and that oil gets bottled because it's a min b'she'ena b'yinmine. Says the Gemara, why should it be min b'she'ena mina? I have a min b'minahu. What the Gemara is asking is every if you see the picture, every mincha has oil and flour, right? So the minchas kohen has a lot of oil, and the regular mincha has a little bit of oil, as you can see in the picture. So if they get mixed up with each other, it's like min b'mina, oil getting mixed up with oil, and therefore nothing gets nullified, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say something is going to get nullified? So the Gemara is going to give you right now a fantastic answer, and this is where we'll end. The answer is like this: when you have oil of one mincha mixing in to another mincha, let's say the oil of the minchas kohen gadol gets mixed up into the kamitza of my mincha, right? So it's oil mixing with oil, but it's also oil mixing with flour. So we view that we say that the oil of the kamitza, we act as if it's disappeared, and it's just oil mixing in with flour. And therefore, my kamitza nullifies the oil of the minchas of the kohen gadol. So the minchas of the kohen gadol is missing some oil because my flour in my kamitza is nullifying some of the oil of the minchas of the kohen gadol, and I ignore my oil because my oil, even though it's min b'minoi, but since it's also min b'she'ena minoi, we make it as a min b'she'ena minoi. So again, if it was just oil and oil, Rabbi Yehuda says it wouldn't nullify each other. If it was oil versus flour, then they would nullify each other. The question is, here you're dealing with oil and flour versus oil. oil mixing with flour and oil. What is that? Min b'sheminoi, min b'she'ena minoi. Rabbi Yehuda says that's considered min b'she'ena minoi, and therefore it's as if the minchas kohen gadol is now missing oil, because some of his oil went into my kamitza, into my little flour. Some of the minchas kohen went into my kamitza, right? And if it went into my kamitza, it's got nullified. So he's missing oil in his minchas kohen gadol, and therefore it's possible. And some of my oil got into his mincha, and his flour was mavatal my oil. That's how it works. So the Gemara says, and this will conclude. We go to Amir Chachim Amir Aleph, Amir Rava, Ksavar Rabbi Yehuda holds, Kol Shehi Min B'Minai, V'Davar Achar. If it's Min B'Minai and something else, so do you look at it as Min B'Minai, or is it Min B'She'ena Minai? If it's a three-way mixture, so we say Salakas Minai can be She'ena. We ignore the common thing. V'She'ena Minai, it's just, we look at it as a Min B'She'ena Minai. V'She'ena Minai Rav Alam Batloi, and the Eina Minai, the flour, it overpowers the little oil and nullifies that little oil. So my kmitza is missing some of the necessary oil, and his minchas kohen gadol is missing some of the necessary oil, because each one was mavato each other's oil. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says, if my kmitza mixed up with somebody, a minchas kohen gadol, the whole thing is possible. Okay, we'll stop over here.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to know.
Great evening.